Good morning, everybody. Today is December 23rd of 2023, and today's topic is going to be wine because obviously we're in the holiday season now and everyone's going to be, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are going to be hosting guests or celebrating or maybe even spending time by themselves at home or whatever. But during these days, I assume that the consumption of alcoholic beverages goes up. So given that that's the case, we might as well talk about it at least a little bit from a healthy social standpoint and maybe make a little more sense out of it. So I am going to talk about wines right now. And so let's just get into it. I might talk about whiskey as well, but let's at least talk about wine. So I've purchased a few bottles of wine lately. I'm going to show you those bottles. And I've also seen people buying wine at the same time I am. Excuse me for the runny nose. And my assumption based on their body language is that some of them are just picking one or the other, but not really knowing what they're picking. And the same thing is perhaps even more true with whiskey. For me, and this is just my preference and my style, people can do whatever they want. You can buy what you want. You can drink what you want. If you like Bud Light and Diet Pepsi, go for it. If you want to know a little bit more about wine and whiskey, then this is the video for you. So I guess that means I'm committed to talking about whiskey. So I guess maybe I'll start by talking about whiskey, even though I was going to talk about wine. I'm going to try to resist talking about whiskey right now. I'll try to save that for a different video, even though it'll be a really short video. But anyway, let's get back and talk about wine. So I learned something from John Cleese, the UK actor and intellectual, semi-intellectual at least. Maybe he's more than semi, but he's at least somewhat intellectual. Even though he's an actor and comedian, I learned something from him when I was first learning about wines maybe 12 years ago. And that is something that I now interpret and call the law of wine, because I think this is the most important rule about wine. And that is, John Cleese said, a good wine is a wine that you like and that you're willing to pay for. So it really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Now, obviously, right now I'm going to get into a few more details, but ultimately it's whatever you like and whatever you want to pay for. So I'm not going to talk about any wines that are expensive because I don't think paying more for wine gives you a better wine. And anybody who knows wine would agree with me. You can spend $40 or 20. You can spend $20 and get a good bottle of wine. You can spend $40 and maybe get something a little better. But beyond $40, I'm talking about retail prices, not restaurant prices. For retail, by the time you get beyond $40, you know, you either know what you're doing or you're doing it for a specific reason, or you don't know what you're doing and you're just blowing money. Some of the best wines I've ever had were about $20 to $40. And I don't see any need to pay more than that. I have purchased bottles of wine with friends or for special occasions, and I paid $250, closer to $300. I think the most I ever paid for one bottle of wine was around, believe it or not, it was for, I was celebrating a specific event with a specific friend, and I think I paid $400 for a bottle of wine one time. But that was just a one of, and I hope that I never do that again. But I did do it with that friend on that occasion for a specific reason. And it wasn't necessarily even any better, you know. I would have been better off with one of these wines. One of which you could buy in a grocery store next to a gas station. So let me just show you. I'll start with what I consider a good baseline wine, and then I'll work up from there. So I'm just going to look at these bottles. So what would be a good baseline wine? Well, I guess this would be a good baseline. I'll go with this one. This would be a good baseline wine. So this is from a company, a vineyard called Baronia out of Spain. And this would be a good place to start. This happens to be organic. So this is a 2020. So let me back up just a little bit. So what is wine and why do people care about wine? Wine is obviously made from grape juice, fermented grape juice. But wine is different from, just drinking grape juice or lemonade or whatever. If you think of beer or lemonade or fruit juice, basically you're just tasting one or two flavors within that beverage. Coffee is obviously much more complex than grape juice or whatever. But wine, and whiskey as well, wine is famous for being a complex beverage, or the flavor structure is very complex. And that's why people like wine. You don't have to be into it. You don't have to be into it right now. You might be into it later. When I first started drinking wine when I was in my 30s, I didn't know anything about wine, and they all tasted the same. All I knew is I liked red wine. I didn't like white wine, but for me, they were all the same. So everybody starts that way, pretty much. But over time, you might find that you're inclined towards one grape variety or varietal over another or whatever. So like in my case, for example, for whatever reason, I've always been kind of drawn to Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a type of grape, even though sometimes I wonder why I even care about it. A lot of times I drink them and I don't really like them. So maybe I need to give up on that. Maybe it's what I started with when I was first drinking wine or something. Maybe it was the first grape I ever knew. But this is a Cabernet that I purchased recently. You can see it says Cabernet on the bottle. It says Reserve. So this should be good, right? I should like this wine. If this is a Cabernet Reserve, I should like this. So what I now know is that this is a horrible bottle of wine. And the reason that this is a horrible bottle of wine is now quite obvious, and I'll show you why that is the case in just a moment, and it'll be obvious to you. But anyway, let's get back to this baseline wine. So again, you can pick a wine based on the type of grape. That's a Cabernet. This is a Tempranillo. Most wines from Spain are going to be Tempranillo, even though, of course, you can find exceptions. And you can find blends. But the either official or semi-official grape of Spain is Tempranillo. And it's a good, basic, strong... I used to think of it as somewhat peppery. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's how it occurred to me at first, when I was first kind of learning about Spain and Spanish wines. But it's not, for example, famously sweet. It's not a sweet wine. It's just a good, strong, normal wine. So you can pick a wine based on the type of grape, based on the region, the soil, the climate, the country. All of that influences the type of grape. So, theoretically, if you were to drink a Cabernet from Oregon or Washington, it would taste different from a Cabernet from France or, in this case, Chile. So some people like particular grapes, some people like particular countries or even regions. And believe it or not, like some people in Spain, Spanish people drink a lot of wine. I mean, it's just part of the culture and part of their history. But sometimes they'll even talk about which side of the mountain or what plants were growing next to the grapes that might influence the flavor. I mean, some people really get into details. And maybe those people have, really developed or sensitive taste receptors. And maybe they pick up on things that the rest of us don't. Or maybe some of us, like me, I kind of program myself to not care about some things. And at a certain level, I just don't care anymore. And I don't want to care about that level of detail about wine. I just don't care. But for people, who really love wine and know the region, they actually talk about, what side of the mountain on a certain region, and that would influence the flavor of the grape based on how much sunlight it gets or how much weather, if it's a microclimate or whatever. So anyway, those are some of the variations on the theme of wine. First, starting with what type of grape, then starting with what country, what region, what climate, what microclimate, what's flowering next to it, the year, and then, of course, the age and the processing of the wine. So the way I think about wine at 4 different levels of age. Typically, more age costs more because they had to store it for a longer period of time, but it also tastes better. So as wine is developing or maturing over time, and we're talking about somewhere between 0 and 5 years, typically, some of that time, if it's a good wine, will be spent in oak barrels. And so the wine, the grape juice that's fermenting, receives flavors from the oak, just like whiskey. And that influences very much the flavor of the wine. So I like oaky wine. If it's a young wine, it's not going to be very oaky. It still might be okay, but it's not going to be really complex. And again, the reason that people drink wine and they appreciate wine and they take classes to learn how to drink wine and appreciate it is because of the complexity of the aromas and the flavors and all that. And that's also why people drink wine out of glasses that are shaped as such. So it typically has a big body and a narrower neck. I'm not saying this is the perfect wine glass. It just happens to be what I had nearby. But the idea of a wine glass shaped as such with a fat body and a narrow neck is that you want to trap the smells, odors, aroma of the wine within the glass. And so theoretically, if you want to go, depends on how far you want to go with this whole thing, but if you were to take a class on drinking wine, which I never have, but I've seen a few videos, what they recommend is that as you're drinking the wine, you're actually inhaling at the same time and you're breathing in the aroma of the wine. That's why these glasses are shaped to kind of trap the aroma of the wine. So you would drink it and inhale at the same time, and that would give you more kind of an olfactory sensation. So that's why wine glasses look like that. And so what else? Let me get back to this bottle. I'll just go through the bottles I have here. So Baronia is a really, in my experience, it's a good brand from Spain. It's from the Rioja region, which is arguably, or perhaps not even arguably, but it is probably the most famous region in Spain for wine. If you're driving from Catalonia and Barcelona and Tarragona, where I used to live, if you're driving north from that region toward Basque country and San Sebastian, Bilbao, then after you've been in the car for maybe 3 or 4 hours, you're going to pass by the Rioja region. So it's not quite the northern coast of Spain, but it's certainly on the northern side of Spain, north of the Catalonia region and Valencia. We used to drive by it all the time, and some of these vineyards we used to drive by. So I'll show you a wine in just a moment. We used to drive by that vineyard just traveling between San Sebastian and Barcelona, and one vineyard was on the right-hand side, the other one's on the left-hand side, depending on if you're going north or south, of course. But this would be, you could expect that this would be a good wine. It's organic, it's from Spain, it's Rioja, and it's a Tempranillo. So, if you're starting from zero and you're going to have guests at your house and you have to buy a wine, if you start with a Spanish Rioja wine, even if it's a basic table wine like this, it's probably going to be at least acceptable. I would expect that this wine is probably going to be reasonably good. So that would be a good starting place. Again, if you start with a Spanish Rioja wine, you're probably going to be okay, and then you can do better from there. So better from there would be the same brand. So this is a Baronia, but this is a Crianza. It's also from Rioja, and obviously it's a Tempranillo. So Crianza, so you'll notice that the other bottle didn't say anything. It didn't say like how many years or whatever. It had the date on it, but it didn't say what class of wine it was per se. This is a Crianza, which means it's been stored and matured for at least 2 years. So this is a young wine, but it'll be a little bit better and more complex than the other one. Even though I had a slight preference for the other one because it's organic. I guess I'll just do these in order of what I think would be quality. Here's another bottle of wine. So now we're getting to the next level. So this is a vineyard called Marquet or Marquez. I would typically say Marquet, even though the exact, that would be more like the French pronunciation as far as I know. The Spanish pronunciation would be Marquez, and the name of this vineyard is Riscal. I don't really like that name, but that's what it is. And you'll notice, you can see this, you can find this on the international market pretty easily. And you'll notice that they put like this wire mesh around the bottle. They are the only company that does that. So if you're running into the store and you're just going to grab a bottle and go, you could look for this mesh and you'd be okay. This is a Rioja. So it's from the Rioja region of Spain. This is a reserve. It says Reserva right there. It gives you the year. So reserve, to qualify as a reserve wine, it has to be aged for at least 3 years. So remember the other one, the Crianza I showed you was 2 years. This is a reserve for 3 years. Excuse me. I've purchased wine from this vineyard, and the first wine I ever had from this vineyard I thought was horrible. Maybe it wasn't a reserve. I bought it in the United States. It may have just been a table wine, and maybe it just didn't taste good, or maybe I didn't know any better, or maybe whatever. But I didn't have a good impression of this vineyard. But this bottle of wine was actually quite good. Again, it's a Rioja Reserve. If you get a Rioja Reserve, it's probably going to be good. You really can't go wrong, in my opinion, with a Rioja Reserve. This is one of my all-time favorite wines. This is actually one of the first wines I ever drank when I was starting to relocate to Spain. Again, you could say Marquet. I'm guessing that might be more close to the French pronunciation, even though, strictly speaking, from a Spanish language perspective, this would be Marquez or Marquez. Marquez de Murrieta, Marquet de Murrieta. It's a reserve. Looks like 2018 in the mirror there. And it's from Rioja. And this is a damn good wine. One of my favorites. First time I ever drank this. And the setting definitely influences the experience of wine. But the first time I ever drank this wine was in a restaurant called Agua, right on the beach at Barcelona, a little neighborhood called Barceloneta. And that was my first experience of this wine. And I still remember it, obviously. And that was 2013. Yeah, so here it is 10 years later, and I still remember the first time I ever drank this wine. So, good wine. I think it's a mix, yeah. So it's 86% Tempranillo, 8% Grisanio, 4% Mazuelo, so those are the different types of grapes, and 2% Garnacha. Garnacha, yeah, which happens to be a grape that I like. My favorite grapes, other than Tempranillo, which is good, but it's not like special. Again, for some reason, and maybe it was just like my first experience, I've always liked Cabernet. But my definite all-time favorite is Italian Primitivo wine. So Primitivo wine from Italy comes from a small region in southern Italy. And they're called Primitivos, a really strong, robust grape. I love it. In the United States, it's called Zinfandel, and I don't know if it has the same flavor and the same tonality based on the difference in the climate, etc. But definitely one of the best wine experiences I ever had was actually in Rome, drinking a Primitivo with some friends at a conference that we did there. So again, Marquet de Murrieta, if you're driving from Barcelona to San Sebastian in the Basque country in Spain, if you're driving from south to north It'll be on the right-hand side of the road. And on the left-hand side of the road will be this one called Muga. Again, this is a Rioja Reserve. If you run into the store and you grab this off the shelf, you can be confident that it's going to be good because it's a Rioja Reserve. You could buy a Grand Reserve. That means it's been aged for 5 years, but that might be more than you need for most occasions, unless you're celebrating like something a little more special. So I don't have any political plus or minus with any country. I lived in Spain, but I'm not fascinated with Spain anymore. I was for a while until I lived there. I do have sympathy for the people of Chile because of the fact that the UK and the United States overthrew their democratically elected government for business reasons back in 1971, and that resulted in the murder and torture of hundreds of thousands of people in Chile at the hands of a dictatorship that was placed by the UK and the United States. So I have sympathy for Chile, but I don't have sympathy for their wine. So this is a reserve Cabernet from Chile. This should be a good wine, but to me it tasted like fermented grape juice, like that was somebody left a bottle of grape juice in the car over the weekend and then they drink it. Not that I've ever done that, but I'm just making that up. So this wine for me was horrible. And I've had this experience twice now with a Chilean Reserve Cabernet. So why is this wine nowhere near as good as this Crianza from Spain? At least for me. Maybe you like it and you can go back to the John Cleese law of wine and, the best wine is whatever you like and you're willing to pay for. For me, this young 2-year-old Crianza is better than this Reserve from Chile. So why would that be? And that's because in Chile, their definition of a reserve is only 6 months old. So that's why to the extent possible, I will never purchase another bottle of Chilean wine because they're not complex, they don't have good flavor. Again, this is a Chilean reserve, but in most countries, a reserve wine means at least 3 years. But for some reason in Chile, maybe just to sell more wine and produce it faster, etc., they call a reserve 6 months, and that's for me that's just a ripoff. I've had that experience twice now. I don't want to have it again with Chilean wine. So that's almost all I have to talk about. Except you have to know how to open the bottle. So let's see. So let's look at this one. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't talk about this one. So I bought this one just the other day. Protos. This is a kind of an edgy brand, I guess I might say. It's kind of on the edge between being good or being bad in Spain. So let's see, what does the bottle say? So this is a organic, ecological wine. It's a Tempranillo. It has the European Union organic leaf on it. So it's organic wine, that's why I bought it. What else? Oh, the region? Ribera del Duero. Ribera del Duero. So this is not a Rioja wine. So this is also kind of, the northern aspect of Spain, but it's between the Basque Country and Galicia, right around this beautiful medieval city called Burgos, right around that region. So again, actually exactly between kind of Navarra, Rioja region. If you're on the highway, you could stop for coffee at a city called Logroño, which is right next to Pamplona or pretty close to Pamplona. But then if you were to continue west, you would eventually pass by Burgos, which is a beautiful city with a medieval wall that has statues in it. And around that region is where this wine comes from. And then you would go another 3 hours or 4 hours to get to Galicia, depending on where you're going. So I expect that this will be good. I don't expect it to be great. But, for an organic wine, hopefully it'll be okay. So aged 9 months in barrels of oak from France and the United States. So I hope that this is good. You'll notice that it doesn't say Crianza. So I would call this a table wine. So again, the way that I think about it, if they don't tell you how old it is or if they don't put a classification on it, then I'm assuming it's just a table wine less than 2 years. The 2-year mark is Crianza, 3 years is Reserve, 5 years is Grand Reserve. So this should be okay. So let's talk about how to open a bottle of wine. I realize that might be basic for some of you, but what I ultimately want to show you, and I don't know if I'll do it right now. Maybe I will. What I ultimately want to show you is how to open a bottle of wine just using your hands without using any tools. Maybe I'll save that for a different video. But at least I'll introduce the topic right now. So the way that I typically open a bottle of wine, I pull off this kind of cap thing, which is where the tax stamps are, etc. Some people cut it. I don't know. I don't know why they do that. I just pull it off. Maybe they want to show the label or show the stamp or something, but I just cut it off. That's why these implements have a little knife in them. I hate these things, but that's why I'm showing it to you. They have a little knife where you can cut this cap, typically aluminum or foil or whatever. You can use a regular, like a basic corkscrew might just be made out of plastic. You screw it into the cork and then you have to pull it out with brute force. I don't like those, even though they're a little bit better to travel with just because they're smaller. This one has a knife blade on it, so you may not be able to get that on a plane. But these are common. These are popular because they're cheap. They make employees work a little harder, and they're thin. So you'll see that restaurant employees commonly use these. I think they're horrible, and I think most business owners and managers are cheapskates. That's why they force their employees to use these. But it's not because they're good. It's just because they're cheap and they're skinny. So basically you screw this in and then you can use this little leg or arm here to kind of force the cork out of the bottle. The problem with that is that this metal foot thing here can break the glass, and that's happened to me at least once. The first time it ever happened was with a really important bottle of wine that ended up getting glass shards in it. So that's why I don't like these. I hate them, actually. The ones that I like are these. So yeah, they're a little fatter and they're a little heavier, but they also protect the bottle. So you screw this thing in, the arms go up, and then you push the arms down and it leverages out the cork and you don't have to fight with it. So, it's basically foolproof unless a person's not paying attention. You have to put the corkscrew into the cork, straight into the cork. You don't want to start it at an angle because then you're going to scratch and potentially break the glass or whatever. But if you do it, if you're paying attention, you put the corkscrew in right down the center, you pull the arms down and that pops the cork right out and you're good to go. However, at some point in your life, you'll probably have the experience of needing to open a bottle of wine at a picnic, at a restaurant, at an airport, or whatever, and you're not going to have anything. So somebody forgot to pack this in the picnic box, or you're at an airport and you need to open it and you don't have anything to use, or you're at a restaurant and the service is horrible, or the waitress or the waiter is distracted or whatever, and you're sitting there like a chump and you don't want to keep waiting around like a chump. So at some point in your life, you'll probably have to open a bottle of wine with your hands. And you can watch videos on this. Some technique exists, like hitting a bottle of wine against a shoe or something like that. If it works, if you have to do it that way, then do it that way. I think that's kind of absurd. And for me, that would be too much show. Like, I want to open a bottle of wine in a way that's not totally ridiculous and is a little more occult, like I'm not trying to make a big show out of this. So the other day we were at a restaurant and we got the wine, but the waitress never came back to open it. So I just opened the bottle of wine at the table just with my hands. And I've had to do that a few times. So I'm just looking at some notes. I recorded a video on this yesterday, but the video didn't work out because of the lighting and such. But I've already talked about all of that. So I guess I'll go ahead and open this bottle of wine right now. So let me show you how to open a bottle of wine just using your hands, and in a way that's not stupid and dramatic, but it'll get you out of being a chump sitting around at the dinner table waiting for somebody to open your bottle of wine. So, first time I ever did this was also in Malaga, and the waitress brought the wine, but she never came back to open it. So we were just sitting there like idiots. And I said, well, I'll just open it myself. So that's how I developed this technique. So let's assume, I'm going to try to do this in a way that's kind of smooth. But let's assume we're in a restaurant and we need to open a bottle of wine at the table because the waiter or the waitress never came back to open the bottle of wine or whatever, and we're tired of waiting. Which for me would be a pretty fast procession of events. So let's open this just using hands. And, I don't think you have to be particularly strong to do this, but you do have to have some force. The other thing, and I'm going to show you how to do this just with your hands. If you have a knife or something like that, then that would make this process a little better and a little cleaner. So I'm going to show you the crudest and most basic way to do this. If you've got nothing, if you have a knife, it's a little easier. So, okay, I'm going to open this right now. So, my way, my way of opening a bottle of wine, first you got to get rid of the cap. This thing, just pull it off. Now, the cork in the bottle of wine is going to be stuck. So after sitting it, in some basement or whatever for a couple of years, it's going to adhere to the glass. So the first thing you want to do is break the seal, because otherwise you're going to be fighting against kind of the inertia of the cork. So the way that I do that, I just put my thumb over the cork and then just push down on it, and you'll feel it move just a little bit. And that's all you want. So when you feel it move, then at least it's mobile. Let me make sure it's really moving. So again, let's assume we're at the dinner table and we're trying to open this bottle of wine, but we're not trying to make a big show out of it. If it were a good dinner table, I'd be able to push down. Right now we're at my desk. It's not really designed for sustaining weight necessarily because of the... Yeah, so it's moving. It's flexible. I am going to close my computer just to have a little more space and a little less concern. What you want to avoid if you're trying to open a bottle of wine with your hands, what you want to avoid is dripping on yourself, staining the whatever, or your computer in this case, or spraying everybody at the table with the pressure that's going to develop. So you want to avoid that. So for that reason, I've got this hand towel here, but let's assume that we're at a decent restaurant and I've got a cotton cloth or whatever I was trying to say, napkin. So let's assume this is a cotton napkin, and I'm going to try to wrap this thing up. Now, from having been a germaphobe since a young age, since I was a kid, I would also want to make sure that my hands are clean before I do this, because if my hands are dirty and I have to put my hands around the mouth of the bottle, for me that would be impolite. So I would make sure that my hands are clean for my sake and everybody else's sake, just to be, polite. And then I'm presuming that I would, if I can't use the surface of the table. Let's say the table is wobbly, or I don't want to make that much of a show about it or whatever, or it's a white cotton tablecloth that I don't want to stain for the restaurant. Then I would just put this on the seat as I am right now. So this is just sitting with me, and I'm going to try to wrap it up a little bit just so I don't spill all over the place. But basically from there, the goal is just to push the cork into the bottle. As you, or as I, push the cork into the bottle, obviously we're going to develop some pressure within the bottle. And once the cork passes the neck, you've got the potential then to spray yourself, which is why I closed my computer. So you don't want to spray the table, your guests. You don't want to spray yourself. You know, assuming that let's assume that you're wearing a white shirt or something. You don't want to spray yourself with red wine. So again, the goal is to do this. It's a little bit tough, and it's a little bit primitive, but you don't want to. You're trying to get out of being a chump, and you don't want to make yourself more of a chump while you're trying to get out of being a chump. So I'm going to put this bottle of wine in the seat, and I'm going to start pushing the cork down. And this one's okay. But like I said, I don't want to spray myself, anybody else, and I don't want to spray the seat and make a mess out of things. So I'm just pushing down with my thumb. So I've got reasonably strong thumbs. I don't have like Superman hands or whatever. But you can see I've already made a little bit of progress getting that cork down. So let's just keep pushing it in. So I do have rather fat thumbs, and you can see from the indentation on my thumb that I'm going to reach a limit where I can't go any farther with my thumb, and I'm going to have to change fingers. So right now, I'm not pushing against the resistance between the cork and the glass. I'm pushing against the resistance of the pressure that's building up. Because as I push the cork in, we're going to get more pressure inside the bottle. That could potentially lead to spraying, which is why I've got the towel covering it. You know, just like you would if you're opening a bottle of champagne, you have to use a towel to protect yourself from the spray. So my thumb is starting to hurt a little bit just because I'm pushing on it. So, but I'm also at the point now where my fat thumbs don't go any more into the bottle. So I'm going to have to switch fingers, and I could use any finger that's available. Thankfully, I've got 4 more to pick from. So I'm going to try to make a little more progress, but I actually have to shift now to my index finger and try to make some progress. Depending on the size of the silverware at the table, I may or may not do this right now. You could use the dull end of a fork, or you could use a spoon, like you could use the spoon handle or a knife handle or something like that. I may have to do that in just a moment, but let's see if I can do it just with my hands. Using a utensil like this does provide some advantage because it helps you push the cork out of the way. If I just push the cork in, the cork's going to want to float in the wine, and it's going to want to block the neck of the bottle. If I can push it farther in, like with a knife or the dull end of a fork or something, then that gives me the chance to put the cork horizontal instead of vertical, and that gets it out of the way. Once you've poured your first glass or two, then it's not an issue. But for the first glass, it's kind of a hassle. All right, so let's see what else I can do. Yeah, so I'm pushing the cork down, but the pressure is pushing the cork back up against me. So at some point, I just have to commit and get it done. And at the point of committing and saying, screw it, I need to get this bottle open, that's where the pressure builds up, and we're potentially going to spray red wine. So I can feel the wine on my finger now. So I'm obviously into the bottle. I guess some people would have some risk of getting their finger stuck in the bottle. You don't want to do that, of course. So I'm just about finished. I ran out of space with that finger, so I'm going to my pinky finger now. Okay, so I'm in the bottle. I'm well into the bottle now. Again, I would only do this with clean hands out of being polite. But the bottle apparently is open now. Like I said, the first glass is the most difficult because the cork wants to block the neck of the bottle. That's why if you were to use, and maybe I'll show you in just a moment, if you were to use, so this bottle of wine is now open, and all I did was use my thumb and then my little pinky finger. And you'll notice I didn't make a mess, I didn't spray anything. I lost maybe a teaspoon or a tablespoon worth of wine there. So let's see if we can actually pour it. So you'll see that it doesn't want to pour because the cork is in the neck, just like I told you it would. And, you know, maybe some bottles are better than others or whatever. Okay, so step number one was opening the bottle. The bottle is now open. Now we want to pour, again, without making a big show out of this. So, you know, I could have done that at the table and maybe no one would have even noticed. If the conversation is good, they would notice less. Again, we're assuming my hands are super clean. And in my case, they are. So I just want to get a little flow going here, get that cork out of the way. And I think right now we're going to be good to go. Yeah. So there it is. I just opened a bottle of wine, just using my hands. And if you've got another cork around, then obviously you can. So here's the bottle of wine. Now we have enough space. The cork is just kind of hanging out, floating, swimming in the wine. That's fine. And so I corked it with another cork, and we're good to go. So wine was served. Didn't have to wait around on a waiter, waitress, or bottle opener. And I did that without spilling anything. And a little bit of stain on the tablecloth. Or if it's a paper napkin, then obviously you just throw it away. My rule with drinking wine is that I absolutely never drink wine in the day. So I'm gonna use a different glass and just cap this. Or I'll just cap it later with something else, a piece of whatever. But I don't drink during the day, never. So that's gonna have to just wait. So after you open a bottle of wine, you should let it sit for maybe 10 or 15 minutes at least to kind of let it breathe. But that smells really good. But that lets, apparently something, excuse me, apparently that lets something kind of get released, and the wine definitely tastes better after it's been exposed to air. And that's basically all I have to say about wines. From an international perspective, and I'll just make this a quick comment. American wines are pretty famous for having like artificial sugars and junk put in them. Excuse me, from the lack of regulation. The only other comment I want to make about national wines per se is that if you buy a wine from the Bordeaux region of France, typically those have a lot of pesticides in them. And that was told to me by a guy from France. He told me that the Bordeaux wines have so much pesticides that even the people from France won't drink them. And then I later looked that up and found it to be true. So apparently, for whatever reason, in the Bordeaux region of southern France, the reason that it's called Bordeaux is because it is the border between France and Spain. The wines from that region are famous for having a lot of pesticides, so I wouldn't drink a Bordeaux unless it was organic. I guess since I'm wrapping up this video, and just to make it complete, I'll go ahead and talk about whiskey, since I mentioned that earlier. So basically, when we talk about whiskey, the starting point of the conversation, really, and for me anyway, is it a blend or is it a single malt? And I personally only drink single malt, and that is the reason. The reason for that is that single malt has been filtered and it doesn't have as many congeners in it. Congeners, as the name implies, are combinations of chemicals, typically a sugar with a protein. And that's what contributes to the sensation of hangover the following day or headache. So I remember the first time I ever drank a whiskey blend, I got a headache the next day and I just felt miserable, even from drinking just a really small amount. So for me, like a tablespoon of whiskey, if it's a blend, will give me a headache the next day and I just feel sick. But I don't have that same experience with single malt. So single malt has fewer congeners because of the way it's been filtered or processed, and so you're less likely to get a headache or hangover if you drink a single malt. You can see this says single malt right there. Double cask matured, right? So I'm reading it backwards from the mirror. But this is a good single malt. For me, all single malts are good. The more years, the better, because that gives it more flavor because it's been sitting in oak. And basically, whiskey is an extract of the oak barrel itself. So the more time it spends in the barrel, the better. I've only gone as far as 12 years. I don't think I've ever had an 18-year or a 15, even though I'm interested in trying it. So what then would be the difference if this is a... did it say Scotch? Yeah. So if this is a single malt, 12 years, what's the difference between this and this, which is also a 12-year double barrel, double cask single malt? What's the difference between these two whiskeys? Your time is up, and the correct answer is that Macallan, unlike this Aberlour, if you look at the color, and I realize the lighting's not perfect, they're comparable in color, actually. The reason that I purchased this Aberlour the first time was that it was a little bit darker than the others, and I thought, wow, that means it's got more phytochemicals in it, more antioxidants, more anti-inflammatory components. Excuse me. But turns out that that's not the case. Aberlour, like most whiskeys, uses artificial colors to make it have that brown caramel color. Very few whiskeys, including Macallan, and another one that I like, let me think of it, Glenrothes, which is a round bottle. Very few whiskeys do not put artificial colors, and Macallan is one that does not put artificial colors. This Aberlour definitely has artificial colors in it, which is why I don't buy it anymore. So right now, my position is I would only buy Macallan or Glenrothes. They're both either 12 or 15 or 18 years. And obviously the 18 years gets more expensive. They had to store it longer, and it's more potent in terms of its flavors. But again, in summary, if I'm going to buy or drink a whiskey, it's got to be single malt so I don't have the congener headache the next day. Typically 12 years. I could fantasize about a 15 or 18 year, but I don't think I've ever had that. And obviously they cost more, but they're harder to find as well. But you can find a 12-year single malt whiskey pretty easily. But once you're at the decision point, for me, the next decision point is, does it have artificial flavors or not? Sorry, artificial colors. I don't know. I think that wine's actually giving me a little bit of a cough just from being open. Maybe it's gassing off the sulfites or something like that. But again, right now, I would either go with a 12-year Macallan or Glenrothes because they do not put artificial flavors or colors. What gives a whiskey its beauty, so to speak, is just the caramel color, but you don't want that to be an artificial caramel color. You want that to actually come from the wood. So that's my quick summary on wines, how to open a bottle of wine without any tools, and then I just told you what I know about whiskey, which is single malt, Macallan or Glenrothes, so it doesn't have artificial colors. And after that, just enjoy it and get over yourself and everything else. So that's my conversation for the day, and I hope you're all doing well. Happy holidays, and enjoy your holidays in whatever way that you want to, even if that means staying home and doing nothing. But if you're going to stay home and do nothing and you're going to drink wine or whiskey, now you know how to do it with a different perspective. I'm not going to say a different level, because do whatever you want. Remember, the best drink is the one that you like and the one that you're willing to pay for. So I learned that from John Cleese, and with that, I'll close out this video. Take care. Thank you. Hope you're doing well. Bye.